We are continuing our news broadcasts daily on the coronavirus, the CCP virus, and I'm still here, quarantined, well, semi-quarantined in my home in New York. We'll start today by talking about these test kits. Now, those of you who tuned in last week know that we talked about how Spain and Italy bought these virus test kits from China and found that only about 20 to 30% of them were accurate. Now we have news coming out from Turkey saying they've rejected Chinese test kits. They're saying only about 30 to 35% are accurate. Turkish Health Minister Fahrettin Koca confirmed later on Friday that Turkey had tried some rapid antigen tests arrived from China, but authorities weren't happy about them. This is a quote. It says, "We didn't release them for public use." Koca also said that Turkey had received a different and viable testing kit that are based on antibiotics from China. Said they have 350,000 of them. Now, as you remember, on March 18th, the Czech Republic had purchased about 150,000 test kits from China. They paid about 14 million crowns for 100,000 of them, which works out roughly to about $546,000, only to find that 80% of the test kits were faulty. And of course, the same issue happened in Spain, where only about 30% of them were accurate. This, of course, raises a couple issues. One being the made in China problem, where products typically don't work as planned, unfortunately. But I think also something much bigger. I think it raises two questions. On one side, there's the question of, well, did they sell faulty kits intentionally? Or are these the same testing kits that they were using in China? Because that could tell us one of two things. It could mean that, one, they're either intentionally selling faulty kits either to cut corners and make money, or because they're trying to cover up the numbers around the world. Who knows what they're doing? The Chinese Communist Party's kits themselves just don't work very well, which means the numbers in China, even those who were tested, could be much higher than even the Chinese Communist Party was aware of. Now, if only 20 to 25% of these kits are actually reliable and testing accurately, that could mean the numbers, even the numbers the Chinese Communist Party has been hiding from us, are higher than what even they are aware of. This could be a very serious sign of this virus. Now, going into the next news update today, there are mass protests, I think bordering on riots, taking place on a bridge between Hubei and Jiangxi province in China. Keep in mind that Wuhan, the epicenter of this virus, is the capital city of Hubei. Now, long story short, the Chinese Communist Party is planning to reopen Hubei. They're lifting the quarantine on Wuhan allegedly around April 8th. If you've been following these news updates, you'll know that it does not appear the virus is over in China. Very far from it, even though they're not reporting cases anymore. They're at risk of a second wave outbreak, as people who still have the virus are released from hospitals, returned home, as people are being turned away from hospitals, again continuing to infect people going back to work. We'll see what happens. It's not a good situation, to say the least. And it's of people from Hubei who are trying to get into Jiangxi province to go to work. Long story short, Chinese police blocked them on the bridge, and these people weren't having it. They started overturning police cars. The Chinese regime sent in riot police. There was some violence, as you can see in the videos, people fighting a bit. It does not appear it got too violent. But regardless, this does show a pretty concerning picture of the state of, let's say, the situation in China, where people don't really, in my opinion, maybe it's a good thing, but people are not afraid of the Chinese Communist Party anymore. They're willing to call it out. They're willing to curse it. They're willing to overturn Chinese police cars on a bridge going into Jiangxi province. This ties into the issue of civil unrest in China, especially when people haven't had work, they have no income, they still owe rent, they still have medical bills, many of them, and the situation is not good for them. In China, the Chinese Communist Party holds power in two ways. One is through fear, the other is through financial interests. In both of those areas, they have lost hold on. And we're now seeing the, I'd say, beginning of the results of that. Keep an eye on this. I assume, based on my analysis, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, in other news, there is a viral video going around of the WHO Assistant Director in an interview with a Hong Kong journalist pretending to not hear her questions when she brings up Taiwan. And now that this comes at a bad time.
Will the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
And now that this comes at a bad time for the WHO, or maybe an opportune time for us, seeing what the WHO really stands for, because the WHO was really just holding water for the Chinese regime during its whole cover-up of this outbreak. It was repeating the Chinese propaganda on the numbers. It was repeating Chinese propaganda on this idea there was no human-to-human infections. It was believing the Chinese regime at every step of the way until the situation got out of hand. And now we see the WHO Assistant Director refusing to talk about Taiwan. And keep in mind right now, Taiwan has been trying to get into the WHO, the World Health Organization under the UN. They've been trying to get into the WHO and have been rejected because of the Chinese Communist Party's influence over the WHO. And this is, of course, raising issues on, well, does the WHO really represent global health, or are they a political organization holding water for the Chinese Communist Party? And in other news, this is an interesting issue of legal warfare taking place right now. There is a class action lawsuit that was just filed in the United States against the Chinese Communist Party. It was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. And it says, quote, this is from the lawsuit, "This is a class action brought by the named plaintiffs, individuals, and business owners in the United States and the state of Florida for damages suffered as a result of the coronavirus pandemic against defendants, the People's Republic of China, and its various government entities overseeing the response to the coronavirus pandemic in China generally and with Hubei province and the city of Wuhan." And it states the PRC, the People's Republic of China, and other defendants knew that COVID-19 was dangerous and capable of causing a pandemic, yet slowly acted, proverbially put their head in the sand and or covered it up for their own economic self-interest. Again, class action lawsuit against the Chinese Communist Party of people who have lost money over this, from either unemployment or their businesses being hurt, calling out the Chinese Communist Party for covering up this virus, holding back information that would have informed the world about the scale and danger of it, and also covered it up internally in China, allowing it to spread until it was too late. We'll see how that goes, but here's where it gets really interesting. The Chinese Communist Party has responded by suing the United States for a, quote, coronavirus cover-up. Radio Free Asia reports, quote, 2 state-backed Chinese lawyers have brought lawsuits against the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and other U.S. departments alleging that they covered up the emergence of the coronavirus. Now, a lawsuit in the United States, filed in the District of Florida, is going to be held by the standards of law in the United States. A lawsuit filed in China is going to be held by the laws of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the Chinese Communist Party appears to be playing a game with this. They know that they, probably will lose this court battle in the U.S. It's unclear whether you can actually sue a foreign government and succeed on U.S. soil, especially China. This may be more of a symbolic lawsuit in the U.S., but in China, the Chinese Communist Party can dictate the outcome of a trial. And when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, legal warfare, the manipulation of legal systems, is part of their military doctrine. It's called the 3 warfares doctrine. 3 warfares being legal warfare, media warfare, and psychological warfare. Now, we've talked a bit about psychological warfare in the past when it comes to this whole narrative battle. Psychological warfare is not necessarily lying to people. Psychological warfare is altering the way you interpret information. It's changing the conclusion you come to when observing accurate information. Media warfare would be the controlling of outlets of information, whether they be news outlets or social media, or even online discussion, say a forum. And legal warfare would be the manipulation and use of internal or external legal systems. I've mentioned in previous episodes how this ties into, for example, the South China Sea, where the Chinese Communist Party employed this strategy to, an incredible degree. Long story short, they used legal warfare as a smokescreen to prevent, as of course they went into the South China Sea and took over the territory, built artificial islands, and built military bases on them. They used legal warfare as a smokescreen to prevent this conflict from entering the political or military realm. They kept it locked up in the courts, where they said they had historical ownership over the region. And while they kept it locked up in the courts, they were able to move forward with their whole actions. Eventually, it was found in the international courts that yes, China does not have historical ownership of the region. But China said, well, internally in China and our own courts, we do. And so we can do whatever we want, long story short. And so this is another example of legal warfare, where the Chinese regime is fighting back against a lawsuit by filing I'd say phony lawsuit within its own court system. And in other news, a cat has contracted the coronavirus. It tested positive in Belgium. Now this is from the Brussels Times. It says, quote, the veterinary medicine facility in Liege reported that a coronavirus infection has been determined in a cat. The cat lived with her owner, who started showing symptoms of the virus a week before the cat did. This is the first known case of a cat, but in China and Hong Kong, there were 2 cases of dogs contracting the virus. One of them, a Pomeranian, actually died from it. South China Morning Post had some articles on it. If this virus can transmit between species, it again raises a couple questions. One is still, what was the intermediary species between a bat and a human for this virus? Was it a cat? Was it a dog? Who knows? The Chinese Communist Party, of course, originally said the virus started in this Wuhan seafood market, went in, basically destroyed the crime scene, got rid of all the evidence, and now there's no way for the world to know what the intermediary species was. If the world is going to prevent the further spread of this virus, we need to know what the intermediary species was. Otherwise, unless it came from a lab or something like that, otherwise that means there's an animal running around still likely spreading this disease. And now that dogs and cats have been shown to be able to contract the virus, this does raise some serious questions about that. With that said, let's go into some of the comments and questions from our readers, or viewers, sorry, I'm a print journalist normally. Now, I mentioned in a previous episode, if you all wanted me to do a video on the history of communism, please let me know, and a lot of you responded with it. I appreciate your response. This is from Owen Fleet. I would love to hear your insights on the history of communism. Georgia Henderson, I would love history of communism video. Nikki Dulce, I want to hear more about the history of communism. Yeah, thank you, folks. I really appreciate it. All right, I'll put together something on it. We'll deep dive. Maybe we'll do a couple videos on it. We'll have to see. Next question is from Marty Thel. It says, quote, meanwhile, we hear not a peep from Russia nor anything about Russia at all related to the coronavirus. Is this not strange to anyone? And yeah, that's actually a good point, Marty. Of course, we're not hearing about cases in a few countries, Russia being one of them. And of course, it's very easy to not have cases if you're not testing for it. Very likely, they're either not testing for it or they're not releasing the numbers. Not clear what. Next question from Terrence Lemire. I need to correct you on one point you made. It is called the Tomb Sweeping Day. Thank you, actually, Terrence, you're absolutely right. In a recent video, I talked about how family members are going to the local cremation centers and the funeral homes to collect ashes of family members who died of the virus. The Chinese Communist Party, interesting enough, is putting people on the ground, of course, interviews, said that they put caps on the number, around 2,500 a day per funeral home. And of course, I said in the video that this was because people are preparing for the Ghost Festival. And you're right that the Ghost Festival is on September 2nd. The holiday coming up is the Tomb Sweeping Day, which is on April 4th. Next comment we have from B005. It says, quote, "I agree with most of what you say, but please stop the partisan nonsense. The Republicans have used this bill as a boondoggle for corporate welfare. $500 billion slush fund with no oversight. Except Mnuchin? But you start the partisan bashing. Be a reporter, not a GOP hack. Don't be the propaganda you report in China. I'm currently in China trying to get back. I agree and appreciate the reporting on China and the corrupt criminal CCP cult here, but really take cheap shots against the Dems when the GOP are far worse. Stay focused, stay nonpartisan. Otherwise, you're just a GOP shill." Thank you, B005. Yeah, folks, I'm trying to be nonpartisan, so if you do see me start to get partisan, don't hesitate to tell me, call me out, call me names. It's okay. Yeah, you're right. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Next is from this one. It says, quote, "It's probably not your thing, but I am enjoying this format from you. Maybe you can continue a weekly episode once things get back to normal. I also enjoy your interview series. Keep up the good work, brother." Edit. Oh yeah, also interested to hear more on the history of the commies. The more information out in there, the more likely it is that people might hear some truth. Thank you, this one. I appreciate it. Yeah, actually, we'll see the format afterwards. I enjoy this format also, and it seems people do like it. So maybe once this whole virus is over, once I'm back in the office, once we have the studio again, maybe I'll still do a couple one-on-one, just talking to the camera videos in addition to the interviews. On that note, I'm still planning to do some interviews. I'm working out some plans for remote interviews now. Next is from Fret Not, Trust in God. It says, "Joshua, please tell us more of what to expect if Xi goes out of power and opposition party gets in power. Did someone say his opposition is even more hardline, more militant? Thanks so much." Actually, yeah, this is a big problem. And so in China, there are two main political factions. One is the Xi faction, Xi Jinping being the head of the Chinese Communist Party. The other is the Jiang faction, Jiang Zemin, being 2 leaders ago. Of course, there was Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping. Now, Jiang Zemin rose to power after the Tiananmen Square massacre. I mean, how do you rise in power in a system that doesn't have elections? You rise in power through political correctness, through aligning yourself with the regime's more devious activities and systems. And so if you support, say, the mass murder of Chinese students when other Chinese officials might not support it, very likely you're going to get a little boost within the Chinese Communist Party system. Jiang Zemin's faction has a lot of blood on its hands. The Jiang faction, well, Jiang, of course, rose up through the Tiananmen Square massacre, and he also launched the persecution against Falun Gong. 100 million Chinese people, 70 to 100 million Chinese people, but trying to be good people, practicing truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and getting persecuted for it. We know now that they're using these people as living sources of organ transplants. They had a whole system in China of re-education through labor camps, slave labor camps. The Jiang faction is terrible. The Xi faction has its problems as well, not trying to defend them in any way. But this is an issue. If China is going to change, you can't just take down the leader. You have to take down the Communist Party itself. The Communist Party itself is the problem. Which is why, if you watch my show and even at Epoch Times, when we call out the Chinese regime, we call out the Chinese Communist Party, not just whoever's in charge of it, or not just some specific leader. The Chinese Communist Party is the problem. If Xi got taken out, the other faction would just take over, or someone within his faction would take over. It would make no difference. The Chinese Communist Party is the problem. And yeah, you're right too. The Jiang faction taking over would be even worse. They're a terrible, terrible group of individuals. Suzette McKee says, "Joshua, can you get more videos showing the coronavirus is still a pandemic in China? I know it's very hard to get videos out, but if so, it would help prove they are lying." Thank you, Suzette. Actually, that'd be a great That's a great idea for a future episode. Let me see if I can get some videos together of the situation in China as it currently stands, and we'll see what we can put together. Appreciate it. Now, with that said, folks, again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We really need your support. If you're on YouTube, click the notification bell. You get alerts when our new videos are up. We'll be continuing our coverage of the coronavirus, the CCP virus, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So please remember to tune in. And with that said, see you next time.